Hi, it's Doug DeVitri with the CoTrackPro podcast, and today, very special guest, Jill Kaufman, or also known as Divorce Coach Jill. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me, Doug.
Look, you've been doing this for a long time, right? And you have a large group of professionals and families that you work together. Tell us a little bit about your practice and how it's kind of evolved over the years.
Well, I'm going to start from the 90s when I was teaching parenting classes and everything was in person. And I would get to a point where they wanted to work with me individually. And I told them I'm not a therapist, so I can't do that. So I eventually went back to school, got my master's in social work, and became a licensed clinical social worker in the state of New Jersey. And then I went through my own very high conflict divorce in 2012. Did everything wrong, made every mistake that you could make, spent way too much money, hurt myself, my kids, everything was terrible. And I ended up figuring out how to get out of it. Um, and my attorney didn't agree, and she made me sign something that said, I don't agree that you should sign this document. And 13 years later, I'm very happy I did and didn't go to court. And so after my divorce and the dust settled a couple years, I started really focusing on people going through divorce in my therapy practice, and then I started coaching. And I got trained to be a mediator, and like all of those things kind of fell into place. And this is my passion. I don't want people to go through what I went through, and it's not necessary if you have
Yeah.
the right support.
Yeah, well, let's talk about some of the challenges early on, right? And then also post-divorce, which many people think, once you sign the paperwork, it's done. There's still a long way to go. So maybe you can share some ideas on how um, some of the mistakes that maybe you could prevent early on.
Yeah. Well, so everybody told me hire a divorce attorney, and that's what I did. And my ex said, you have an attorney. I have to get an attorney. So he got an attorney, and we were communicating through our attorneys, which costs a lot of money right from the beginning, as soon as you hire them. And they asked for lots of information. Attorneys are not usually, I mean, there's a few out there, but usually they're not financial professionals. So giving your attorneys all this financial information is not the best choice. You really want someone who is a financial professional or a divorce coach or somebody who has a financial background to help you with your finances. Attorneys are also not parenting professionals, so they're not going to, um, I mean, they have knowledge, but they're not the person you want to ask all the parenting questions. They're experts in the law. So people need attorneys, and going to your attorney for legal questions is exactly what you should be doing. But to know how to do that in the best, most efficient way is really difficult. So that's where a lot of the mistakes are made. Um, I could go on and on about that.
Well, I'm sure there's two different paths, right? So let's pretend you go off the referral and then you have the attorney that says litigate, 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 right? That's one path. And then you have another attorney who you might meet with that suggests a different collaborative path, right? Which one do you choose if they're the ones who are supposed to be the experts here?
Well, those are not the only two choices either. Like collaborative attorneys are very different than mediation. And so if they're not talking about mediation and you don't know what that is, then you're not going to see it as an option. And a lot of people say, well, I have a high conflict divorce, I can't mediate. And that's also not true. So, getting that education about all of your options is really important. And a lot of times, attorneys have certain ways of working, and they'll just give you what they know and what they're comfortable with.
Sure, sure. So what are some of the landmines that people can run into? I imagine there's quite a few, given the intense emotional strain that can impact families.
Well, one of the big ones is what's going to happen to the house, right? And a lot of people think that, the kids are going through so much that you don't want to put them through another transition of not having staying in their house. So each um, party may think, oh, I want the house. And so that right there, they say, oh, well, we got to fight because I need the house. And when you go through this process, you can't be emotional. If you're making emotional decisions, you're probably not going to make the best decisions for you and your children. And you're probably going to end up making a lot of mistakes. So if you tell your attorney, I am the one who does most of the parenting, I should stay in the house, he wants the house or she wants the house, um, they're going to say, I'll get you the house. No matter what, if that's what you want, I will get you the house. That is what they're taught in law school. And that's a big landmine because saying you want something without going through the process and negotiating and really thinking through without emotions is going to get you maybe not to court, but in a high conflict situation.
Yeah, sure. So the more time it takes, the more money it takes. What about the strain on the children? What are some ways to protect them or insulate them from what seems like a catastrophe?
And yeah, that's exactly why I do what I do because the people who the big parties who are hurt are the kids. I mean, yes, the parents are hurt too, but the kids are, this is their childhood if they're, young or teenagers, wherever age they are, even older children. If your parents are fighting, if there's legal battles, if there's tension in the relationship between the parents, it negatively impacts the kids. And they've done studies, I'm sure they've done so many research studies about the difference in the outcome between an intact family and a divorced family. And it's not whether the kids come from a divorced family, whether or not they come out okay. It's the relationship between the parents. If there is a tense, high conflict relationship between the parents, that is what's going to impact the kids. And the attorneys don't usually think about that. They don't think about the emotional toll on the kids and on the parents. And so you need somebody on your team who's going to be very aware of that and really ask you, is this worth it? And let you think about it and think it through in a really rational, logical way, not emotional.
Yeah, sure. And especially for somebody who has a hard time understanding all the implications. I know I'm somebody who's a visual learner, right? Getting that information and then deciphering it all can be a huge challenge. What are some of the, I don't know if you call them workflows or processes,
Strategies.
strategies to start to narrow down to what's really most important for the kids?
Well, I think it depends what place the person is in. Like if you're just starting out and you're emotional, you're going to say what's important differently than after a few weeks, a month thinking about it and learning about it. So we do start with, what's the most important thing to you right now? And some people will say my retirement or the house or, whatever it is, the kids' schedule. Like for me, it was the kids' schedule actually. And so for everybody, it's different. And that's the beginning. But we talk that through and say, why is that so much the most important? What else is important? And what is going to happen if you don't get that? Or what are you willing to give up in order to get that? So that's a strategy that develops as we talk it through and as we get to know what really is important in a, like non-emotional way. And then we come up, I'm a trained mediator, so we come up with creative options to get what we figure is really important. And there's so many unlimited options that people can have. Some people the real strategy is knowing what the other party wants and trying to get them what they want so that you can get what you want. So that's like the on a high level, that's the strategy.
Well, there's also these guardrails that you have to put around the process because if you don't have different ways of, I guess, protecting yourself, you could get into significant trouble down the road, right? And being able to forecast that ahead of time is not something that's going to be on someone's radar who's going through this stress. how would you help set somebody up so to be able to forecast what they might be go through if they choose an option that might not be in their best interest later down the road?
Well, I mean, I give examples of I have clients who are stuck in this because if one party is really set on going to trial, you're going to go to trial. But there's a lot of times, and a lot of times I have clients who's like, we've tried mediation, it doesn't work. But sometimes after a while of doing that process and going thinking about court, going to court, people get more reasonable because they realize that all of this costs a lot of money, costs a lot of time. So it's, just because you tried mediation once doesn't mean a few months later, if you go back, it won't work. So it's about educating the other party, keeping the relationship lower conflict. So no matter what the other party says, you know how to respond so that you don't escalate the conflict, so you minimize the conflict. And so you're at a place where you can have a conversation and say, well, this is always an option if we ever want to go back. I have this other mediator who is very experienced in XYZ, so you can have a conversation with them and you're not in this super high conflict situation where you won't even talk to each other.
Well, I know that if you're in a difficult situation like this, conflict can escalate or it can de-escalate, right? Like it could get much, much worse if you wanted to. What are some ways that you suggest people to de-escalate some of that conflict?
I love that question. Okay, so if you were married for how many ever years, you have triggers for each other, right? You each know the trigger. So your soon-to-be ex may say things on purpose to trigger you because they want you to look bad or they want to get you upset so that you are an emotional wreck or whatever it is that they're doing. So the key is to recognize what those triggers are and why they're triggering you, and to be prepared for them at any moment. Um, I don't recommend speaking to them about anything emotional. So email is so much better than text or speaking because you can think about it, you can think it through. And I can't tell you how many people have sent me their emails that they thought I went through ChatGPT. I reread it. I think it's very good. It's not emotional. And I'm like, yeah, it's emotional. You don't realize because you have this relationship with this person for so long, you would never speak to them in this way if you were not emotional. So even though you think it's not emotional, it could be emotional. So it's very important that you get someone like me or a friend or somebody usually experienced and knowledgeable to look things over before you send it. And email's a great way so you don't get triggered. But if you do get triggered, tell the other person, you know what? Let's take a break. We'll talk about this another time. I have to run, whatever it is to get out of the conversation as quickly as possible so you can get yourself and I talk about all the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. You need to think with your prefrontal cortex. If you're triggered, you're thinking with your amygdala, the base of your brain, and you're fighting or running away. So you're not going to be able to respond really well if you are triggered.
Sure. One of the things that's coming up more and more is people having less access to justice, meaning they can't afford an attorney, right? Or family law attorneys have now become luxury items for people, which I know the system is designed for that. But what can you suggest to somebody who is maybe on limited resources to either protect their mental health or to protect their children? When they just can't, they're just having a hard time doing it themselves.
There's a few things that people can do. Number one, have a consultant with a pro se attorney. I actually know a pro se strategist, and you can just get consultation, which is not that much money, and then you have a strategy for your divorce. The other thing is there's some low cost legal options out there, like Hello Divorce is now becoming all over the country. It started in California, but they have lower cost like packages.
Wow.
that you can buy. There's something called Legal Shield. That's another lower cost. So, you know, obviously you get better representation if you can afford like a really high priced attorney, but not like you said, not everybody can afford that. And these are good options because, you can really get a lot from not too much money, not spending too
Sure.
much.
Sure, and the landscape with using technology has changed significantly, I think, from when you first started practicing this.
Yes.
What are you most excited about for the future? As we kind of look at, we're in a society where we're more high conflict than we ever have been before, right? Social media, I know, is a big cause of that. What are some of the ways that you're thinking that can help solve this?
So there are more options now there than there have ever been. There are companies starting all the time, like your company, and like which are helping to streamline the process and to avoid court. And so people are becoming more aware of it. Most people still don't know about all these different options that are out there. But I'm very optimistic that um, we're all doing things right now to change the divorce industry to make it better.
Yeah, well, tell us about some of your tools, or you host a workshop, and I think you also have a Facebook group
Yes.
pretty popular.
Yes. So I have a big Facebook group for people going through divorce. It's called Separation and Divorce Support Community. I go live in there a lot and I give a lot of good resources in there. And it's just a supportive community for people who are going through this, who need to hear that they're not alone. It's really important. That's the big thing is you feel so alone when you're going through this and you really need support. Yeah, so I do workshops, a lot about different subjects. And I also have a book. I'm getting divorced now, what? Which is, what do I do? Um, and then I also have a directory for divorce professionals, Divorce Network Pro, which I'm growing and building, and there's a lot of resources on there.
Wow, that's really amazing. So you can work with people one-on-one. You've got a community group, and you've got the workshop. What are some of the websites we can check out to learn more about these?
So, divorcecoachjill.com is my website. You can email me at info@divorcecoachjill.com. If you are interested in any of these things, I can get you connected to them. And then divorcenetworkpro.com is my divorce directory, and there's a ton of information on there.
No, that's really great. I appreciate you being a part of the podcast and sharing those resources. Now, when you taking a look at the future, if we could probably put on our crystal ball here and really kind of take a look at this movement towards people are embracing more mediation, more peaceful alternatives. Um, how do you see that playing out in the next few years when really I think people have been talking about this for a while. It's just we have more access to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm hopeful that it will escalate in terms of how quick people are adopting these alternative dispute options. Because I think that there's just more and more of them coming out, and there's more podcasts, there's more social media about it. So I think people are becoming more aware quicker. I think people are scared though, like they think they need an attorney, and an attorney will protect them. And so I still think people are going to be, going in that direction. But I think the key is to get the attorneys on our side. And that's starting to happen, where attorneys are including divorce coaches and therapists, and financial professionals in their practices so that, it's not just go to your attorney for everything. They have really embraced the idea that they can't handle everything, and that's when I think things will really change, when the attorneys, at least a good part of them, really jump on this bandwagon, and I think they're starting to. So that's a great change.
Yeah, no, that's so great. We created a CLE course for attorneys, and it's more about the technology and about the softer side of it, right? And I think there's a lot of opportunities for all of us. Thank you, Jill, for being a part of the podcast. We look forward to having you on future episodes.
Thank you, Doug. I enjoyed it a lot.